Parent Perspectives, a new podcast from Affect Autism. Welcome to another edition of Parent Perspectives, which is a side podcast to Affect Autism. Because the last Parent Perspectives with Cass Griffin-Bennett on the guest appearance of Kieran Rose at parent support meeting that ICDL holds and I facilitate each week was such an interesting topic. Cass and I continued to speak about other things, which would have made that podcast way too long. And I realized it really was a separate topic from the guest appearance of Kieran. So the continuation of our conversation is essentially like a part two, but really it's a separate podcast today that I'm going to bring to you. We talk about, in the beginning, about the communication aids that Cass uses in her family, which started with teaching her young child robust AAC at the age of 2. She talks about some of the low-tech communication aids that they use in their family, and it merges into a conversation about how we can help our own regulation when we're with our children, and some of the tools that Cass uses in her family that I hope will be helpful for those of you listening. And I encourage people to comment on the blog post and let us know what kinds of things you use. So with that, I bring you the conversation with Cass Griffin-Bennett, an autistic self-advocate and mother of 2 autistic daughters. She's in Washington State. What I loved about the conversation is that it then allowed others to share different kinds of tools. And, I said, I would love to have these types of sessions where we share tools with each other and plan to do these activities and then kind of report back to each other. Like, instead of having an exercise buddy, it's like our parenting buddies where, we get different ideas from each other. And actually, we started doing this in support group a couple weeks ago, reviewing the podcast on the VISPA, the Visual Spatial Planning Assessment, where there's activities you can do at home.
One thing about communication supports that I think a lot of parents in particular have trouble with is that the kid doesn't want to use them, right? Like, oh, nope. And at school, at home, I have found that if I start using something first and I frame it as being for me, then very quickly my children are also interested in using it. So I just want to throw out there that, if you think there's something that your kid would benefit from using, use it yourself in front of them. Model the use without expectation that they do it at all. But talk about how it helps you, right? And not in a not pushy way. And you might be really surprised at their interest level growing from there.
I think that's so true. A lot of times we don't take that extra effort. And we've talked about this a lot, how floor time is really about, or DIR is really about the parents changing and adjusting themselves to help support their child. And unfortunately, not all parents are willing to do that. I think most parents are in theory willing to do that. And then parents have differing levels of support needs themselves that give them the capacity to be able to do everything. And I talked about this at my ICDL conference presentation that, you can't blame yourself for what you were unable to do in the past. And you can't be too hard on yourself for what you're unable to do in the present. You can do the best you can. And I think just setting aside time to do little things to try, like learning an AAC sounds so overwhelming to me. So I can imagine that it would have been such a huge challenge for me. But I think what you're saying is by doing that, yes, you're modeling it for the child. Yes, the child will be interested in it, but imagine how it'll make communication easier for you as well to communicate with your child, and just modeling, like saying things like whatever it is, whatever usual things that you say. It takes years to learn a language. It's going to take months and months to get comfortable and learn AAC, and just not to give up early.
Yes. And to your point about regulation, and I mean, that is, I think, one of the biggest challenges as a parent, period. As an autistic parent of autistic children, sensory needs, competing sensory needs is, I mean, that's the water I swim in, right? That is my environment. So figuring out how to support my own regulation is a constantly evolving thing as well. So our children seeing us explore ways to support our own regulation benefits them, because we are modeling self-regulation strategies and sensory accommodations. But also it helps us, right? It helps us as parents be able to find that calm center, be able to de-escalate, be able to provide more co-regulation with our kids when we are learning how to support our own nervous system, right? So everyone wins.
And that the one thing that really was an insight for me that I brought up in that ICDL presentation at the conference was that I thought I was taking care of myself, because I would have somebody with our son, whether it's his dad or whether it's a helper, and I'd go out and do stuff. I might go jogging. I might go to get a coffee. I might go to a concert. But the insight was, what about when I'm with my child? What am I doing when I'm with my child to help to support that? And what I would tend to do is, you might say mask, you might say pretend, you might say be acting, whatever it is, for the benefit of my child, until I had that time to myself. But that was the big insight. And I think that's been my self-growth in the past year, is learning how to regulate while I'm with my child, so we can be together. Looks like you're holding up something you're going to show.
I am. I'm holding up a little water bottle icon. So, and here's my earbuds icon. We have different sort of strips in our house that have all kinds of low-tech AAC supports, right? That say things like, I do not want to be by myself, or I want to be by myself. But I'm going to use this water bottle one. Very, very frequently, I am standing in my kitchen. I am feeling a little overwhelmed at the rising volume, the sister bickering, all of that situation, right? And all I will do is just stand in my kitchen by where one of these is on the wall, and I'll just point to this and do this. And what I'm doing in the moment there is, one, I'm getting a visual cue to remind myself, right? Oh, you know what? You're feeling overwhelmed. Maybe try taking a drink of your water bottle. But two, I'm giving a little tap, right? So the girls are seeing me do that. They're seeing, wow, mom's getting overwhelmed. Here's what she's doing to try to bring that back down to a manageable level for her, right? And I think a lot of times we don't give kids that that direct chain, right, of what we're doing when we're self-regulating. And I think for autistic kids in particular, if we can sort of, the more of those little insights into how we're keeping our cool when we're keeping our cool, so to speak, the better off they'll be in experimenting with strategies themselves to see what works for them, right? So I mean, it's all over our house, and it's mostly, like I said, aimed at the adults, right? And they see us doing it and then get interested in doing it themselves.
So helpful. I think that's going to be a big piece of my learning, in as I now had the insight, and now how do I put it into practice? To, because does my son just think I'm always regulated? Like, no, like I'm clearly masking it if I'm getting frustrated and angry, and I'm like, okay, sweetie. Oh yes, right. That's nice, sweetie. Like he should know that I need a break, or he should know that, oh, mom's feeling overwhelmed, and not it for it to be about him, but for it to be about me and what I need to stay calm and regulated. And like you said, that then gives him permission to understand that he doesn't have to be regulated all the time. And when he's not, there's ways we can get through it.
There are things that we can experiment with to see what helps our body get back to a state that we want to be in. Right?
Yes, yes. And another thing that I thought of with everything we were talking about was how we're talking about accommodations for autistic kids that are helpful for everybody. So even neurotypical parents of neurotypical kids get overwhelmed. They also might get so frustrated they can't speak. And what's wrong with using different forms of communication? I mean, people already are texting all the time. I mean, when I grew up, there were no cell phones. We weren't texting. This is a new thing. Embrace it and understand, like, yes, you can text. Yes, you can do different things. We're already using different kinds of, nonverbal communication cues anyway. It's an accommodation that helps everybody. Also, Kieran Rose makes that point that, we shouldn't be thinking about it as, oh, now we got to go out of our way and do all these accommodations just because there's a couple autistic kids. Like, oh my goodness, what a pain in the butt. No, it's an accommodation that literally helps everybody and helps everybody appreciate, including everybody. It's all positive.
Right. It's all positive. And you're also talk about another little lesson. Your child is also learning that different bodies need different things, right? Which is sort of a really important lesson in thinking about being in classroom environments, right? And sort of how can I support my own needs and take care of me while being in community. That to me, you're talking about social skills, right? To me, it is a matter of self-awareness and understanding how to take care of my own body. And then knowing I am already very intrinsically motivated to be in community. And part of being in community is knowing that everybody has different needs that they are also really interested in making sure that they meet, right? So by modeling sort of what works for you, and that you're a person who's always sort of trying to figure out better ways of meeting your own needs, you're also showing them that being in community requires sort of understanding that everybody has different needs, which is sort of a building step towards, the being in community and social skills, right?
And looking at that from another angle, it's also letting our kids know and learn and realize just through experience, oh, that person doesn't experience the world the same as me. Like, this bothers me, but it doesn't seem to be bothering that person. Oh, I experience this in this way, but maybe that person doesn't experience it in that way. And that's, a real way of learning theory of mind as well, because you're understanding, like, oh, people like what you said, but just coming at it from the other angle, like, everybody's not like me. I can't expect everybody to be the same way, and can't expect them to understand that when I do this, it's because I'm this. Like, they don't know how I experience the world. I also have to take some responsibility to inform people as well. Not when you're like 5, but eventually as an adult, this is what I need. If you don't speak up, people don't know.
Right. So when
I shouldn't say speak up, because again, that's implying verbal language, but the point being advocating for yourself in whatever way.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the big message, as far as I'm concerned, is that what was really missing for me during those hardest early intervention years was any support for my own nervous system. I knew how important co-regulation was. I knew it, right? I didn't need to be told that over and over again, because I knew. And I actually felt really like a failure, right? Because I was being told self-care, self-care, self-care. And it's like, okay, but what's being tossed at me for self-care is either not realistic or doesn't have the in the moment help that I need. right? Maybe going to get my nails done or whatever may come to mind, taking a nice bubble bath, maybe that helped me for a period of time, but it doesn't help me the next morning when I'm in sensory overload and have children attached to me, right? And I'm trying desperately not to lose my cool, right? So thinking more about experimenting and being curious with regulation tools for ourselves is one of the most meaningful things I think we can do as parents, to support our own health, and then to support our children learning those skills themselves.
I'm thinking of a future parent course at ICDL on self-regulation strategies for ourselves. But again, it's so important what you just said, because it's misunderstood. Like, yes, that's all we hear is about, but it took me, I've been doing floor time for 10 years. It took me till now to realize, yes, but you're not self-regulating when you're with your child, in the moment. Like you said, you were taking the bubble baths, you were getting your nails done. I was going for a run. I was going to concerts. I was blaring my music in the car. Like, yeah, like de-stressing. But what about when we're together? Yeah. How can I do that? And just in my conference presentation, I talked about taking the pause, like even just stopping and saying, "Oh, you're asking a lot of questions right now," because my son comes home from school. He's just asking me question. And I'm trying to get dinner ready and I'm like getting overwhelmed and the auditory input is getting to me. Just taking the pause to say, "Oh, you're asking a lot of questions right now," might be enough to keep my prefrontal cortex online and prevent me from getting that emotional trigger where I'm like, "Please be quiet for a minute." Not that I do that, but that's what I'm thinking.
One of our little cards is I need to press pause.
Mm.
And that again would be like, sometimes they're things we want to communicate to each other. Sometimes they're visual cues for ourselves. Looking around, I can see 4 different spots where I have put these so that I can see them when I need to see them. And pause, there's a pause button right there, to remind me to say that. Right. And so, and now I have a 7-year-old who knows what I need to press pause means. She has not used it yet for herself, but I have a feeling probably in the next 6 months she will, right?
Yeah.
And it's very important that these things aren't done with like a threat involved, right? Like we're not
Yes.
saying like, "I'm gonna press pause," like none of that like that. It's again framed as support for myself, right? Here, I can show you when I was talking about what I was seeing across the way. Wait a minute. There. Can you see on the strip?
Yep.
Those are for me. And there's push pause. I can do it different next time. And then we've got over here. Like this is all clearly for me, right? I need my coffee. My like 4-year-old doesn't need to say I need my coffee, right? But I do. And it's a lot easier for me to just kind of come over here and be like, "Whew, guys, whew, whew," right? It's a lot easier for me to come over here and touch ice water when I'm trying to regulate myself than say to them, "Guys, mom is going to drink ice water right now because it's going to calm down my nervous system," right? If I am dysregulated, it is too much to ask to explain myself. But by using these cues, my kids understand what I'm trying to do. And, and I get my own needs met at the same time, right? So
I am guessing that those are also Velcro or something that you can take it off and hold it up. So you can either point to it or you can pick it up and like hold it up and show them.
yep. So we've got ice pack or cold washcloth on neck is one of them. Let's say my older daughter decides she wants a cold washcloth, right? Then if she wants, she can come up and grab it and give it to me, right? Or she can just point to it or do whatever, right? But the point is that one fell. One thing that's really important, the reason I wanted to do the Velcro dots is to show that like we can experiment, we can try things. Not everything that I put up there is going to end up being meaningful for me, right? So we have sort of a basket of all the loose ones that we kind of go through and we'll add to our own strips. And after I made one for me and for dad, right? Then the girls wanted of their own, and everyone's is on a different background. So for the girls, they have their, like, one is rainbows and the other is like her 3 favorite colors. And they chose that. So it really has been an incredible tool for us as a family, and has really supported the grown-ups first and foremost, which we really need.
And that brings up the point that this is one example. This is what helps Cass and Cass's family. It may or may not help you and your family, but having to, going through and figuring out what works for your family. That's why I love the idea of giving different examples. If people have examples they want to post at the blog post, it would be wonderful, because different things help different people for sure. I love it.
I've got my little self ones say things like, I can do it different next time. Is on the wall right there, right? And that's something that I like, maybe I mess up, right? And I can sort of go down a little shame spiral about like things I could have done different, right? But reminding myself, you know what, I can do it different next time. Is something I need to hear. So if there's something you need to hear on your daily throughout your parenting journey, put it somewhere you can see it, right? Little things like that really go a long way. And the other day I was doing my little water bottle. It actually says ice water in the kitchen. So I was doing my ice water situation, and my she had not turned 7 yet. So my 6-year-old watched me do that, saw it, was like, Mom's doing her ice water. And then she pointed to the strip on the wall where I had it. And one of it below has 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is, I've got a little card up, and it's the senses, right? And so you name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can smell, that sort of thing. It's a grounding exercise. And she touched it and said, Mom, do you want to do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 with me?
Aww.
And I said, sure, we can try that. But to me, that is gold, right? I mean, that is
theory of mind.
Right. That is theory of mind. That is everything I'm trying to do, right? As a parent. And it's centered around taking care of me, right? It all started because I'm trying to support myself and have visual cues. And in doing so, I'm showing her strategies that we can use to get our bodies to be where we want them to be, as different people who have different needs.
It's so interesting. Like when I talked about coming at it from a different angle, like in We Chose Play, which I made in 2021, 2 years now, over 2 years ago, in episode 2 is all about what did I do wrong? So the first episode is about sort of that shock that people get with the diagnosis and that whole grief that parents go through, and how you have to get over that and have that energy to love your child for who they are, and Dr. Robert Nassif's input about ambiguous loss. Episode 2 is about what did I miss? So the parents, maybe not all parents, but a lot of parents go through this. What did I do wrong? I must have done something. Like, why did my child end up differently than I thought? And you go through all these things, and then you get sucked into all of these marketing schemes where people are trying to cure autism, and you need to do this, and you need to do that, and you need to do that. And so I'm trying to debunk all of that stuff. And then the rest of that episode is the podcasts I did with Dr. Kathy Platzman, who is a DIR floor time psychologist, talking about that, avoiding the blame. And you talked about the shame spiral. I love that term, and how we can't get caught up in that, because if you're focusing on the past, you're depressed. If you're focusing on the future, you're anxious, and just trying to stay in the moment and realizing like, oh, I guess I didn't know better then in that moment. Oh, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know I'm going to try. And what you said, I can do it different next time. Like, those things are so important. So this discussion with you, Cass, gives me another angle to look at those podcasts I did with Dr. Platzman, and rethinking that episode 2 of season 1 of We Chose Play that I made. So it's just always sort of adding a layer to the learning that we continue to do on our own individualized journeys. Well, thank you so much, Cass. It's just so wonderful hearing from other parents, and hearing how other parents deal with the same kinds of things, and especially from an autistic parent who has the autistic experience. And just all of this is just so helpful. I really appreciated our conversation, and hope that other parents and practitioners who are listening, and anyone else who's listening, benefited from hearing some of these things that we discussed. And I'll be super eager to hear if people have other ideas. Can put it in the comments at the blog post at affectautism.com. Thank you so much, Cass.
Thank you very much for having me, Daria, and I will see you on Monday.
See you at Parent Support Meeting on Monday.